Okay, I have a few slides here. It's kind of a teaser because I'm going to come to the CAG meeting in October and do a more in-depth presentation about the BIOP. BIOP is short for biological opinion. But we're gonna do a quick update on it here today. So I'll also mention that all the pictures are from National Marine Fisheries Services website. So I stole pictures from them. Next slide. So a little bit about what a biological opinion is and what this whole process is. So the Endangered Species Act, there's a section of the act, section 7A2, that essentially says any action that the federal government takes, they need to consult with the services, National Marine Fisheries Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, in order to make sure it doesn't jeopardize any endangered species. And the kind of traditional way of thinking about this is like when we build a dam, we should make sure it's not going to make a species go extinct. Sorry if that was kind of, did we do that back in the day? I don't know. So it's a little interesting that we're doing it here because this is a cleanup. So like, hopefully this is not endangering any species. We're supposed to be doing a cleanup to make the environment cleaner, but still it's a very good thing to do and double check and make sure that, we're seeing the forest of the trees here and we're not doing more harm than good. And especially when we are so focused on, environmental contaminants and this kind of very environmental contaminant realm, when they're focused more on this more, endangered species realm, looking at individual species. So what you do is you consult with the species, or you consult with the services. The federal agency, in this case EPA, does a biological assessment where we assess our action, and our action here is the cleanup. So we're doing an assessment of the cleanup and its impacts to the endangered species, threatened and endangered species. And then the services do come out with a biological opinion. They essentially evaluate your project and your biological assessment, do their own individual take on it, and come up with their opinion about what its effect on the different species are going to be. Is it going to jeopardize any of the endangered species? Is it going to adversely affect them? Or is there not going to be any effect? And in our case, we work mostly with NOAA Fisheries. So NOAA Fisheries covers most of the ocean-going species. U.S. Fish and Wildlife does more of the freshwater species. We worked with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but they determined that our action would not have a adverse effect on any of the species, endangered species under their authority. And so we did not have to do a formal consultation. But with National Marine Fisheries Service, we did a formal consultation. We'll move further into that. Can you do next slide? So these biological opinions that the services release, they include an analysis of the proposed action. So in our case, the cleanup. It states for each species, whether it's going to jeopardize them or adversely affect them. It includes an incidental take statement. And that's, bureaucrat talk for essentially a statement of how many fish you're allowed to impact. And it comes with reasonable and prudent measures. And these are sort of like best management practices that you should implement on your project to make sure that you are not injuring these species any more than you have to. It also comes with conservation recommendations, and then, as alluded to earlier, compensatory mitigation requirements. Next slide. So a little history on our consultation. We started this way back ago before the record of decision was put out. Just kind of drafted one, which I think is a good way of kind of having a good pulse on making sure that your remedy is not going to jeopardize any species, even before you finalize consultation. It's like, let's keep in check and make sure we're not doing more harm than good. So we did that back in 2016, but then it was sort of put on ice while the record of decision was being written. We restarted coordination with the services in 2020. Once we had our record, our ROD was finalized and we knew more about the remedy. And we finalized our biological assessment in 2021 and just in May of this year, we got our biological opinion. Next slide. And in the biological opinion, one thing that's interesting, which you'll notice soon when you look at the list, the species list, is that it is broader than the Superfund site. It is everywhere that the action could possibly impact. And so you'll see from this map, it evaluated impacts all the way down to the mouth of the Columbia River, upstream to Willamette Falls, and even upstream the Columbia River a little ways. Very conservative evaluation as necessary for these sensitive species. And in our situation, why that is considered really is, downstream effects of the cleanup. We're going to be stirring up a lot of contamination as part of the cleanup. And so the residual sediment will enter the water column and flow downstream. It's just kind of a necessary evil of the cleanup. And also, some water quality impacts. Yes, next slide. So here's the list of the threatened and endangered species that were evaluated. The top 13 or so species are really salmon and steelhead. Below that, we've got green sturgeon, eulachon, the sunflower sea star, and southern resident killer whales, orcas. You'll notice for all of the species, this is their ESA status, the T or E is threatened or endangered. These columns represent different decisions. So this is the action likely to adversely affect the species or its critical habitat? It is yes for all of the species evaluated, except for the southern resident killer whale. Anyway.
What is P?
Where's that? Where's the P? P? Oh, good question. Proposed. Nice. So all of the species evaluated, it said that the action was likely to adversely affect them, except for the southern resident killer whale. And just a note on why the southern resident killer whale is involved. They do, in the winter, come down to the mouth of the Columbia River and, snack on some salmon down there. So that is why they are involved, as well as, there may be impacts on salmon that they eat. So the next category, though, is all of these species except the killer whale are adversely affected, but is it going to jeopardize them? And it's no, all the way down. So it's not. They determined that our cleanup was not going to jeopardize any of these species. That was great to hear. And then would it is the action likely to destroy or adversely modify critical habitat for the species? So top to bottom, it's no, and that's because in our cleanup, we require mitigation for any habitat destruction. Any questions? Next slide. Yeah.
The likely to adverse.
Yeah.
The effect. I think I heard you mention just the sediments that are stirred up.
Yeah.
So how large of an area is that expected? I mean, those are awfully big yeses. Whereas again, if we're going to contain that turbidity to the cleanup site or a mile or two downstream, are you expecting it to go all the way down to Astoria?
It is noted in the opinion that it is likely minuscule and impossible to measure, but it is a very conservative evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, next slide. So, similar to what I just said, some of the conclusions from the biological opinion, taken together, the conservation measures applied to each project will ensure any short-term effects will be brief, minor, and scheduled to occur at times that are least sensitive for the species. And so that's a note on the requirement that we do our work within the construction window when fish are less likely to be migrating through the site. Another conclusion is that there's not expected to be any significant aggregated or synergistic impacts of all of the different cleanups happening, because we have some self-limiting requirements in the cleanup where only a few project areas will be done at a time. We don't want to dredge everything all at once, because that would be a lot of disturbance all at once. Lastly, I noted that the overall effects of the proposed action on endangered species will actually be beneficial. So that was a nice note at the end that all this evaluation and all these adverse effects, at the end of the day, it is a cleanup, and the action will actually benefit all of those species. I think that is one more slide. Yeah. Questions?
Can you go back to that? Like I was just curious about. My name is John Cruz. I work at the Boulder County Health Department. I'm just curious why the eastern side of the Columbia. Sorry, I think I'm touching something. Yeah, the eastern side of the Columbia was included. Is that because of how water flows that way as well?
Yeah,
And like they migrate that way?
yeah. I believe it is fish traveling in all of this area, as well as tidal influence potentially.
Thanks.
Thanks here. I'll ask a question. So it studied the cleanup, but did it study the disposal of we'll be talking about disposal plan later, but did it study the transport of disposed material further up the gorge?
It's a good question. We had a lot of conversations about that. Even like, and this is TMI probably, but so let's say we need a barge and it's built in Japan, and we have to ship it across the ocean and then bring it in. Like, at a certain point, you have to draw the line somewhere on studying the action. But what it did in relation to our conversation today is it studied the impacts of building a transload facility, and actually included in its evaluation the construction of several transloads. A transload, we'll talk about this later, is when you take material and essentially move it from one type of transportation to another. So from a barge to rail, and so it's a facility that can transfer that. So it did actually evaluate the construction and operation of facilities in the site if that were to happen. We do not have one right now, but that was evaluated in this.
And then second question, so you said Fish and Wildlife decided not to study the impacts to terrestrial species, and I'm wondering why streak-horned lark was studied.
Yeah, so it wasn't specific to terrestrial species. It was just simply species that they have authority over. And so it was first you kind of do like a peripheral check on what species we think will be adversely affected, and you kind of have informal conversations. And really for U.S. Fish and Wildlife, it was bull trout was the species that they saw as likely being flagged as something that may be impacted. And just based on the aquatic nature of the cleanup. And they determined that the presence of bull trout within the site was so there's very little bull trout in the site to begin with, that it wouldn't adversely affect them to a scale that was further consultation would be valuable.
Real quick, what is the eulachon?
Yeah, it's like a smelt species. Kind of an interesting thing is in the pronunciations. I don't know if I'm nailing it honestly. So, but a fun fact about them is there are some theories that the name Oregon actually comes from sort of a
Sparkling waters. Yes.
So there's like an idea that the original like Oregon is named after this fish because there's like Chinook jargon that was sort of messed up and was the word Yukon, which became Oregon. So there's some theories about that. Yeah. Yeah, there was a big the Sandy River had a big run of them recently, and a bunch of people went out and got them. Yeah, that's these guys.
In April, okay.
Yeah.
Once they announced on Thursday, they have one day, the window 4 hours, when it's open for grab the one bucket of fish.
Right. All right.
Yes, Was climate change adequately considered in this process? I know it's highlighted as a stressor in the bio-op, and how was it included? How was it factored in?
Yeah, there's a large section about climate change in the biological opinion. And how, it is a continued stressor on all of these species, and so, identifying how that is going to be a, continued, factor that's putting stress on these species, so it's kind of considered in their whole evaluation about, the impacts.
Did the bio-op also consider adequately current and future development projects on the river in this area, in the Superfund designation?
There's, it acknowledges the state of the lower Willamette River and the conditions it's in now, and, the industrial nature and, its urban setting. But it really is evaluating specifically our cleanup, not other projects. So if other projects come, they would go get their own biological opinion.
Question on your very first slide states, that the biological opinion is required for federal projects.
Yeah.
So what if these other projects that are not federal?
Oh.
Or if they're federally funded,
Yeah,
how does that work?
yeah, and we're gonna walk right into like a, I'm, I don't work for these agencies, so I don't wanna start like explaining how they operate or anything, but, typically, if anyone else is taking an action within a water body, they're doing it with a permit through a federal agency. And so they are probably, that permit probably went through a biological opinion process or something similar, so. That's kind of I think the nexus there for how it's evaluated by someone else. So your 404 permits, I think there's like a programmatic 404 kind of thing that gets evaluated that way.
Thank you, makes sense.
We have a question in the chat that says, how were the impacts from air emissions from the transport of dredge material to the disposal sites evaluated?
Yeah, air emissions were not really highlighted in their evaluation. Really, the impacts that were targeted for these aquatic species was things like turbidity from the action, underwater noise from the action, these different in reduction of habitat, specifically shallow water habitat and things like that. So it really focused on some of these more near field, more obvious impacts to the species that I think are easier for them to really trace to the species. Laura.
This seems very facile to me, and that there's a lot we don't know about how this was developed, all the details. So this will come out in the document on the 15th.
No, it's already out. It came out in May. It's on our website.
Okay, what's coming out on the 15th of September? There's another document.
Oh.
Um,
Yeah, and as a reminder, EPA does not write the biological opinion.
right,
National Marine Fisheries Service wrote the biological opinion. It's on the website. It's very large.
yes, yeah,
There's a lot in it. Yeah.
right.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.